Okay, so let's unpack this. Um, have you ever stopped to really think about the power that's packed into the words and, the images we use every day?
Oh, absolutely. Especially when we talk about different age groups, right?
Yeah, it's so easy to just let hidden assumptions creep in. You don't even realize it half the time.
And language, visuals, they're incredibly potent. They don't just describe things. They actually, well, they shape how we see people, how we feel about them, and how we interact.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, you brought us this really practical guide. It's focused specifically on avoiding ageism in communication.
That's the one.
And our mission really is to cut through to the most important bits from this source. The core ideas about how language and images might be, well, feeding ageism.
And crucially, what we can actually do differently, like practical steps.
Right. And you mentioned this guide isn't like heavy academic theory.
Yeah, not at all. It's more like a distillation of key principles, designed for action, really. Think of it as a quick start manual for talking about age better.
A quick start manual. I like that.
Yeah.
And that's the heart of it, isn't it? This isn't just about um, choosing the right words for the sake of it.
No, it's about getting closer to accuracy. It's about reflecting honestly, the incredible diversity of people across their whole lives.
And actively dismantling those harmful limiting assumptions.
Exactly. When we choose our words, choose our pictures, we're not just passing on info, we're influencing how people understand things, shaping attitudes.
Yeah, the framing we use, the specific terms, the visuals we pick, it all adds up. It creates the whole story around age in our society.
And the guide basically says, hey, let's be intentional about that story.
Okay, so our path for this deep dive.
Hmm.
We'll look at some common pitfalls the guide points out.
The communication traps we fall into.
Yeah, and then we'll dig into the alternatives it suggests, which sound pretty powerful. It starts right at the beginning, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Tackling something really fundamental, overgeneralizations.
It does. And what's striking is how it immediately challenges that myth, the idea that everyone of the same age is somehow the same, homogenous.
Which is just obviously not true when you think about it for 2 seconds.
Right. And the guide makes this critical point. We actually become more diverse as we get older, increasingly diverse.
That really resonates. I mean, think about it. The sheer buildup of different life experiences,
Different health paths, different careers, or maybe no career.
different family situations, relationships. A person who's, say, 70 isn't just 70.
Exactly. They could be launching a business, or maybe they're a full-time caregiver.
Or dealing with health issues, or, I don't know, training for a race. And someone else their age could be in a completely different boat.
The guide is spot on there. It emphasizes that things like life experience and what it's called intrinsic capacity, basically what a person can do, those things are only partially linked to chronological age.
Right. So assuming everyone in an age bracket is the same, whether young or old, it's not just wrong, it's a huge barrier.
You stop seeing the individual.
And the guide mentions the common stereotypes that come from this.
Yeah. It calls them out, like, portraying younger or older people as all frail or vulnerable or dependent.
Or the opposite extreme, too. Like they're all somehow invincible and super active, which isn't realistic either.
Both are just simplifying things way too much, reducing complex people to one characteristic based on age.
So the nugget here is that our communication, our words, our images, they have to reflect the actual messy, beautiful variety.
The heterogeneity, yeah, within age groups, across age groups.
Because if we don't, we miss opportunities. We
Yeah.
might make bad policies.
And we just end up with a really warped view of the world.
Okay. So building on that idea of how language frames things, the guide then looks at what it calls the problem frame.
Yeah, yes. Often ramped up with fear-based language.
This is where the words we pick can literally paint a whole demographic as like a burden or crisis waiting to happen.
And the guide lists examples that once you see them, you realize, wow, they are everywhere.
Like what?
Terms like silver tsunami or graying population, demographic cliff, agequake, the gray wave.
Wow. Yeah, just saying silver tsunami.
Yeah.
It immediately brings up this image of something unstoppable, overwhelming.
A threat, basically, something you need to defend against.
Right. So it frames the natural process of, populations aging, not as just a societal change with complexities and even opportunities.
But purely as this disaster looming, or a problem we have to somehow manage defensively.
So what's the alternative the guide suggests?
Well, the critical nugget here is to deliberately try to position information about demographic changes neutrally.
Just state the facts.
Pretty much. And what that does is it opens up space for a balanced view, one that includes both the real opportunities and the challenges that come with these shifts.
Instead of just defaulting to, oh no, it's all doom and gloom.
Exactly. That shift in framing is huge. It moves the conversation away from a deficit model like, here's the problem older people cause, towards a more, well, holistic view of society changing, where everyone, all ages, is part of the picture, contributing, facing challenges, the whole thing.
That makes sense. And this seems to lead right into the guide's next point about language, the difference between using euphemisms and just being objective.
Yeah, this is about those times when maybe we think we're being kind or sensitive.
But the words we choose actually end up sounding, what, pitying or maybe condescending.
Or they just reinforce stereotypes. Exactly. The guide flags specific language to avoid here.
Like, give me an example.
Okay, so think about phrases like, poor young man, or labeling someone based on just one thing, like a senile old woman.
Okay, I see.
It also points out euphemisms that can kind of mask reality or sound patronizing, like physically challenged, or describing someone's personality with an ageist label like grandmotherly.
Poor young man. Yeah, that immediately slaps on this layer of pity before you even know anything about his situation.
Right, and a senile old woman uses a really stigmatizing, often inaccurate term linked with age to just dismiss a whole person.
So what does the guide say is the better way?
It pushes for language that's objective, that focuses on the person's actual situation without adding those layers of judgment or pity or stereotype.
Okay.
So instead of poor young man, the guide suggests something like a younger man who is poor, see the shift.
Yeah, it just describes his economic status, no pity projected.
Exactly. And instead of a senile old woman, you'd use language that's more descriptive and respectful, maybe an older woman with a disability, or if it's relevant, a person experiencing cognitive decline.
Ah. Okay, that clarifies the situation, but doesn't reduce the person to a label or lean on a stereotype.
It's about describing reality with sensitivity, yeah, not through the filter of these loaded or outdated terms.
And this objective approach, it extends to specific age words too, right?
Yeah.
The guide talks about using neutral language and avoiding terms that sometimes get used negatively.
Absolutely. Avoiding terms associated with, say, lower competence or less value.
Ah, the words that can feel like labels, that put people in a box, often kind of diminishing them.
Precisely. The guide lists several that often get used in ways that can stigmatize or imply lesser capability just because of age.
Okay, what are they?
For older people, it includes things like the old man, granny, old person, the elderly, even senior sometimes, depending on context.
Right.
And it also flags terms for younger people, like juvenile, which often carries those negative links to, crime or immaturity.
Yeah, those terms definitely feel like they flatten someone's identity into just one category, often a negative one. So what are the better neutral alternatives?
For older adults, the guide suggests using more descriptive neutral terms, things like the older man or the older woman, older person, older people, or older adults.
Simple enough.
And for younger people, just saying younger people or younger person is better than something like juvenile.
And what if you do need to refer to a specific age group, like for, say, program eligibility or some demographic data?
Then the guide says, be direct and factual. State the age range clearly, objectively, like people who are 20 years and older or individuals aged 60 and above. Use it when that specific detail is actually necessary and relevant.
Got it. So the key is moving away from those potentially loaded labels.
Towards more descriptive, neutral language that centers the person, not the category.
It's subtle, maybe, but it feels like a really powerful shift. It goes from labels that categorize and can carry negative baggage to just describing, allowing for individual difference, avoiding those built-in assumptions.
Exactly. And this connects directly to the guide's next big point, consciously avoiding othering.
Ah, right. The idea that our language can accidentally build this invisible wall, creating an us and them between age groups.
That's it, exactly. The guide points out how using pronouns like they and them over and over when talking about a specific age group can make it sound like, younger people or older people are somehow separate.
Like they're outside of our society or something.
Yeah, it creates this artificial boundary. They are like this instead of recognizing that, hey, we all move through different ages. We're all part of the same continuous human experience.
It sets up this binary. Like one group is fundamentally different from or outside of the norm.
Yeah. So the suggestion from the guide is actually pretty simple, but it has a big impact, where you can use more inclusive language. Replace they or them with we or us.
Okay, how would that work?
Well, the guide gives a great example. Instead of talking about what younger people need, try framing it as what we need when we're younger.
Oh, yeah, that instantly changes the feeling.
Right. It reinforces the idea that needs and experiences change through life, but we're all on the same spectrum. We're all part of the same community, just at different points.
It fosters that sense of shared experience, mutual understanding. Okay.
So, shifting gears a bit now from the words we use to how we see things, the guide also has some really crucial advice about choosing images.
Images, yeah, they're so powerful. Often hit you subconsciously, right?
Totally. And unfortunately, they are huge culprits when it comes to reinforcing ageist stereotypes.
The guide points out how often images just default to showing older people as only sad or lonely or frail.
Exactly. Which, if we go back to that first point about diversity, is just a tiny, unrepresentative slice of what aging actually looks like.
It paints such an incomplete and frankly often depressing picture.
It does. And similarly, the guide notes how images of younger people can also fall into lazy stereotypes, only showing them glued to phones or totally lost in tech.
Or just focus on fleeting social trends.
Yeah.
Yeah, that also fails to capture the huge variety within younger groups.
Right. So what's the advice for breaking free from these visual cliches?
Well, the core idea is to actively prioritize images that are positive, diverse, and above all, realistic.
Realistic is key.
Images should really try to show the incredibly varied realities of both older and younger populations.
So that means looking for visuals that show people of different ages doing all sorts of things.
Yeah, working, learning, socializing, caring for others, being active, being quiet, whatever reflects actual life.
And crucially, it also mentions showing positive, dynamic, intergenerational interactions.
Different age groups actually connecting and collaborating, not just existing in separate bubbles.
Exactly. Moving deliberately away from those tired, single-story visual tropes.
It's clear the images we pick are just as vital as the words we choose when it comes to avoiding ageism.
Absolutely. They work together, don't they? They create the overall impression, reinforce those underlying assumptions that the audience takes away, often on a really deep, unconscious level.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive then, we've pulled out some really valuable nuggets from this guide on avoiding ageism in communication.
It feels like the core insights really circle back to just being mindful.
Yeah, mindful about avoiding overgeneralizations, that trap of thinking people the same age are all the same.
Mindful about actively rejecting those negative or fear-based frames, like the whole silver tsunami thing.
Choosing neutral, objective language instead of, pitying euphemisms or terms that diminish people.
Being vigilant about language that others, different age groups, creating that us and them.
And being really intentional about picking images that show diversity and positive realities across the whole lifespan.
This deep dive really hammers home how powerful our communication tools are. Language and visuals.
And using them thoughtfully, it's not just about, not offending someone. It actively helps us see people of all ages more accurately, more fully, more respectfully.
Yeah, it's like a genuine shortcut to being a more informed and honestly a more considerate communicator.
Absolutely. And it makes you so much more aware, doesn't it, how often you see these patterns out there in the media, in conversations.
Maybe even sometimes in your own thoughts.
Yeah. So given how deeply ingrained some of these habits, these linguistic tics and visual stereotypes are, how might, just recognizing them, now that you've kind of unpacked them with us, how might that change the way you perceive the world around you?
Or maybe even how you approach your own daily conversations. That's a powerful question to sit with, actually.